Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Toy Guys Talking. And I'm actually getting to talk to a real life toy, or a guy who has an action figure made of him. It's Scott Neitlich, former brand manager of Mattel, He-Man, Masters of the Universe.
All true, yes.
All true, and an action figure. I want to talk to you about this guy and how this came to be. I guess we'll just jump to that right now, and we'll get into some of the other stuff. But this is the most exciting part for me. The Eternia Palace Guard 2-pack. You've got one as well. That's so cool. So it was a 2-pack, and one of the guys, when you remove the mask, it is your likeness. So yeah, just tell me about how that came to be.
So, well, we'd been making Masters of the Universe classics at Mattel for, this was like about our third year. The line launched in 2008 at Comic-Con. Was that right or not? Boy, the years blend. Either way, we were into, this was 2011, the very top. I think it was like January or February.
That was the King Grayskull box set, right?
Yep, which is what kicked it all off, which was supposed to just be a continuation of the 2000X line. But then when the Horsemen came out with this new prototype, we scrapped all those plans and said, no, we're doing this instead. We're going to start over. And that's how King Grayskull became the first figure in the line versus the last figure in the 2000X line. Kind of weird how that works.
And I just want to tell you directly, I've thought this for years, and it's awesome that I get to tell the guy who had a lot to do with the King Grayskull figure. King Grayskull is such an important piece of the He-Man lore. It's what I call unfinished business. We never knew where the power of Grayskull came from. And sometimes when they get into these prequels, we're kind of left feeling like wish the mystery had never been revealed. But I think the idea of by the power of Grayskull, Castle Grayskull is actually a man named Grayskull. It's the Megaforce thumb kiss. It's absolute perfection. And it builds upon the legend of He-Man.
And I wish I could take credit for creating King Grayskull. That I can't. That goes to Dean Steffen and Ian Richter, who created him for the 2000X series in episode 35, The Power of Grayskull, which set him up. And I agree with you. Yeah, it's like sometimes when Boba Fett takes his mask off and you find out who Wolverine is, it's just not as cool. But
yeah, this
was one of those things that's like, whoa, I want to know more. Like, holy Toledo, there was a Grayskull, as opposed to the true story of how the castle got its name because the writer at the time wasn't going to get credit, so he named it after his girlfriend. But that's not important right now.
Lucky her name wasn't like, Apple Bottom or something like that.
Yeah, the power of Castle App. Yeah, her name was Linda Gray, so he named the castle Grayskull.
Oh, okay.
Because he was a freelance writer and wasn't going to get byline credit, so that was his way of getting credit, like on the page, basically.
I've never heard that. This is why I'm going to really enjoy chatting with you, because I just love hearing all this backstory stuff. And I know I wanted to jump to the Palace Guard, but the King Grayskull figure, who made the decision to say that's going to be our kickoff to the new classics line?
So kind of with what I was saying a moment ago, originally the concept for that slot, that San Diego Comic-Con King Grayskull, was when I had moved over to the Action Play group from I was in the Hot Wheels group, and I'd made a pitch to upper management that we should be doing adult collector action figures, that there was a market for this, and I was spending X amount of money every month, but on figures for myself, and it wasn't going to my own company. It was going to Hasbro or McFarlane, that kind of thing. So once we had the go ahead to develop a adult collector line, which became Matty Collector, the first thing I wanted to do was bring back the 2000X He-Man line, the MOTU 2000X line, which was the Mike Young Productions, what I always call the hyper anime. There you go, right behind you. Those ones, yes, right there, those guys. So that was I was a huge fan of both the show and the figures. So, and those were, that line was actually the very first time adult action figures were made for the He-Man brand. And specifically, I'm talking about the Keldor and the She-Ra figure, because those were designed for San Diego Comic-Con to be sold to adult collectors. a big misconception with that line is it was designed for collectors, and that's not true. It was designed for kids. The line, anything that's sold at retail is for kids. It just so happened that adult collectors also got into it, which was great. But as we can see from the way it sort of fell apart, was because kids weren't into it, the adult collector audience alone was not enough to bear the weight. So my pitch was, okay, well, what if we just redo the line just for adult collectors? So we could bypass retail and sell it directly online, which is what became Matty Collector. So I know this is a long way of answering your simple question. But
I love the long way. If you've seen my videos, I can do an hour on a G.I. Joe figure.
Oh, yes. So
what do they call it these days? Deep diving? Deep diving is all the rage.
Yes. So my original pitch for doing an adult collector He-Man line was to keep 2000X going. And to kick this off, looking at the figures that we already had available, which is called tooling in the toy industry. And that the tool means the mold, the big metal mold used to make an action figure. You could think of kind of like those old Play-Doh molds we had as kids where one side would, collapse on the other. That's basically how action figures are made. They're just injected with plastic, not Play-Doh. So looking at it was...
That's the next step.
That would be the next step.
That'll give them something to complain about.
It's hot and sticky plastic melting. So looking at, we had Ice Armor He-Man, the body, and basically said, hey, that's actually pretty darn close to King Grayskull, who was introduced at the end of the series, and as you said, really caught on. Fans were really excited about him. So the idea was, okay, let's keep 2000X going by doing a 2000X King Grayskull, and we only have to sculpt a head, and we can do a soft goods cloak, which doesn't have tooling, meaning cloth, which is less expensive, and we're done. And it's more or less relatively inexpensive to do, and if it works, maybe we could get enough momentum to do more 2000X figures.
Was there an argument somewhere there, like vinyl, cloth, vinyl, cloth?
I mean, I'm more of a favor of vinyl myself. I like, all my capes, plastic.
To not get dusty or easily cleaned. Yeah. But
if you're going to do cloth, like here's a great one. Here's the Royal Guard that has cloth. There sort of has to be like a real reason for it to be cloth. And I also like consistency. So anyway, long story, but at the end of the day, it became down to tooling because we would have had to tool a cape. And this way we didn't have to tool a cape. Cloth is much less expensive. But then as we're developing what would have been 2000X King Grayskull, we went to Comic-Con and the Horsemen brought out this prototype for a new way to do He-Man in kind of Marvel Legends style, if you will, highly articulated, 6-inch in scale, as opposed to 2000X, which was more 5-inch and had basic articulation.
Yeah, these boys right here.
That guy, yep, him right there.
The game changer.
Yeah, that's the best way of putting it. We took one look at him and we're like, okay, forget the current plans. It makes so much more sense to start a MOTU collector line over from ground zero, basically because it means we could sell all the main characters again. For 2000X, people already had He-Man and Teela and Skeletor and Beastman and blah blah blah. But for classics or new form factor, we could start over. So because we already had King Grayskull kind of going through the system, it was much easier to just switch that plan to doing it on the new Four Horsemen style buck than to sort of pull the plug and say, okay, let's start over and we'll do He-Man first, if you will. So that was basically why King Grayskull became the first figure, because he was far enough along in the original plan to be a continuation or a restart of 2000X, and then just got switched over to the new body and the new scale and became the first classics figure.
And it's a perfect way of merging the two lines too. Because even though King Grayskull had been a 2000X thing, never mentioned in the Filmation series, the new classics line felt more like a continuation of the Filmation series or more in the spirit of the Filmation series. And then putting Grayskull at the very beginning kind of said, now we're merging the two toy lines you've had before into this third. The third was like the hybrid of the first two.
And that was all deliberate too. Yeah, I mean, we knew that this figure would send the message that this line is for collectors and this is new and you're getting characters you've never had before, as a toy. So it worked on a lot of levels. And honestly, when we made it, I thought that was it. I thought, like, we're going to make one figure and that's it. And I was just so excited to have made a He-Man figure, but it turned out we made 300 more. So yay.
And then in 2010, we got to this guy. So the Palace Guard, what was that discussion like? Or was it even a discussion?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like this huge deal. I mean, basically, we were into year like 2.5, 3. We were doing, really the bigger deal was that we were doing an army builder. This was the first time we did a 2-pack, and the first time we did a figure that was designed to buy in multiples, and had different armor pieces, different plates, different heads, different face guards, lots of weapons, with the whole idea that you could buy a lot and then you could custom, make them look different on your shelf.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, we knew we were going to do 4 heads, and I don't even honestly remember the original conversation, if we were just joking around or if I said, "Oh, like, I want to be the white guy head," and because we knew we wanted different ethnicities. So yeah, so basically, I mean, there's a huge history of people who work on toy lines kind of being made into
G.I. Joe, right?
Yeah, G.I. Joe was a huge one. Almost everyone in Hasbro was a Joe. The 4 Horsemen, Corn Boy was a Spawn figure named Corn Boy.
Yeah.
Eric from the Horsemen was Dr. Frankenstein in a McFarlane set. So yeah, I mean, it's not Jesse Falcon was an elf in Lord of the Rings. His girlfriend was Mystique in Marvel Legends. Yeah. So don't tell his wife now. And yeah, so basically, yeah, the Horsemen were like, yeah, that sounds cool. We'll do that. And I kind of actually forgot about it and thought they weren't going to do it. And then the sculpt showed up, and I'd completely forgotten about the conversation because it was kind of just done as a joke. But then it showed up, and I was like, oh my God, you actually did do this. I forgot we were even talking about it.
So they didn't scan you; they just sculpted you off of pictures.
Yeah, I do remember they asked me to take a picture of myself from like the front and the side. But so much time passed between that and the sculpt that I forgot.
Yeah, a lot of production.
It wasn't a scan; it was a sculpt, and yeah, that's pretty much the whole story.
So what did you think of the sculpt then, once you had it in your hand?
Oh, I thought it was like the coolest thing ever. I mean, I joked on my channel, Spectre Creative on YouTube, which people can check out. I actually did a video recently about the guards. I'm going figure by figure.
Yeah.
And I joke about a concept in toy making, if you're familiar with an EGOT, which means Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony.
Yeah.
People who win, it's very rare to win all 4 of those. And in the toy industry, the EGOT would be getting a figure that looks like you, getting a figure you create, and getting a figure named after you. Mm-hmm. And eventually, over the course of 10 years, I actually wound up doing all of that, which was crazy, like not expected. But when you work, kind of like so passionately for something, things like that wind up falling into place. So yeah, I was blown away. I used to play with it. I mean, when it first came, I would just have it like sitting out there on my table, and I'd be like, oh my God, I'm an action figure. I'm a He-Man guard. That is like mind blowing.
And it's not just a custom figure, because a lot of people can do that these days. You can get your own, take pictures, upload it to these various websites that'll make you a custom one-of-a-kind 3D printed head for your figure. And that's cool. You got your own custom figure, but you've got thousands of these around the world. I don't know if you would know the accurate number, but these were mass produced and in many, many collectors' homes. So that's like Sergeant Slaughter or William the Refrigerator Perry getting a figure.
And the great thing is you can cover it up with a face mask and you don't need to look at me.
That's right. Or even pop off the head and use the snake head or the lizard head or whatever. But I've got one of the Scott Neitlich figures guarding my King Randor and Queen Marlena. Does he have a name, or have you given him like your own name?
Well, so he's actually named on the package. So he on the package he's called out as Lieutenant Spector.
Okay.
And that led into the whole thing where a few years later, when we did employee created figures for the 30th anniversary of the line, One of those slots was actually assigned to me by management, and I did a character that I created as a kid that was called Mighty Spectre. There he's right over here. There we go. So there's Mighty Spectre.
Oh, cool.
And if I'd known I was doing this figure, I would have never named this guy Lieutenant Spectre. But I basically named him Lieutenant Spectre because I thought it was like my one chance to get, you know, that name into the toy line. My company is also Spectre Creative. You know, that's my YouTube channel. So that was a name like I always used throughout, you know, whenever I formed companies or clubs, or I used it all the time as a kid, or, you know, throughout high school and college. So when it came time that I got to do Mighty Spectre, who was the superhero I created as a kid, I thought the idea that there were two Spectres in the He-Man world was stupid. Like, why would there be a Lieutenant Spectre and a Mighty Spectre?
Well, so there was a Rio Blast and a Colonel Blast, so...
True. Although I think they were really the same character, just renamed in the show. But but still, point taken. So,
well, you know, for the nitpickers out there, the nit has been picked.
Basically, the easy way to do it was I just said, okay, well, this guy, the secret, eventually just becomes this guy.
Oh, that's a cool idea.
Yeah, so I just made them the same character, and that the reason that he's entrusted with this power suit and all that is because he was such a loyal guard and trustworthy that when they needed a time spy, that's what Mighty Spectre is. Think of him as wearing a DeLorean, if you will. Like, his suit is the time machine. And so that was basically like I just tied him into being a former royal guard that was upgraded to being a time traveling superhero. So
that's a cool idea, and it's awesome to build off of, you know, what a lot of people think is just a nameless, almost faceless, if you put his mask on, faceless guard, to someone who, you know, kind of like Man-at-Arms. I always imagine him starting off as just a regular palace guard as well, and then, you know, he became Man-at-Arms, the captain of or the leader of the guard. So I like that. That's cool.
Yeah, there's, you know, a story there, and you could take Man-at-Arms' head too and put it on the Royal Guard body and have him as like earlier.
I did that too. Yeah, the mustacheless Man-at-Arms head works great on the Palace Guards, and you get yourself a young Man-at-Arms figure there too. Really enjoyed the ability to swap the heads on the classics figures too. I wanted to ask you about how you first started to work for Mattel, but before that, you know, a lot of the figures, I really like the classics figures, but, you know, the ankles, how much does it just kill you? Or is that too leading a question? When these came out, and a lot of them had these production problems, like not being able to stand because of the most common problem with mine is the weak ankles.
I mean, you know, as a collector myself, I always judged the figures I made much harsher than I think other brand managers at Mattel, because I was viewing them, you know, it's like the Hair Club for Men. I'm also a member.
Yeah.
So I was much more critical. So yeah, I mean, it would always kill me anytime something didn't come out right, especially on figures where there were a few times it almost happened like clockwork, where if we worked harder on a figure, trying to like get an action feature to work, like Roboto, getting the gears to turn, we had to run each gear through the mold individually because we couldn't paint them because it would have scratched the gears. So we had to mold them in their color, and all the work we did on that, which was like 10 times the amount of work of any other figure. And the figure wound up having shoulders that were mismatched. You have to really look carefully to see it, and it doesn't bug most people. But I mean,
I remember the first He-Man, I heard about that too. His shoulders were mismatched, and it never bothered me. I mean, he looks fine. I believe this is one of the first ones with the mismatch or the backwards. Never really bothered me, but I know there's people out there who are just looking for their next opportunity to complain about something.
Well, and, you know, a big reason things like that happen, like everything from, you know, loose ankles to swapped parts, is because the runs were so infinitely small. And compared to a retail line that Mattel makes, I mean, Mattel as a company is designed to put out retail lines that sell billions of units, Hot Wheels, Barbie, you know, et cetera. The company isn't designed the way like a Super 7 or even a NECA is designed to handle very low run, high deco, high articulation figures.
Right.
So, you know, it's kind of like doing classics in the Mattel system inherently was going to lead to those kind of issues, because when you do runs that small, you know, if you sometimes like the run has to like, you don't notice these if there's a million units of a Barbie doll out there, and like the first couple hundred or first couple thousand have an issue with the foot, you really don't hear about it because the percentage, the number of units with the problem compared to the total number of units in production is so small. Mm. But with classics, because you're already dealing with such a small run, it goes from being, you know, 1% of the run to 90% of the run having that issue. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
That was basically a reason why, you know, like normally in a normal toy line, you'd have a chance to fix those things because you'd do some of the production, you'd review the toy, and then you'd go back into production.
Yeah.
But because classics was such a small line, we kind of didn't have that step. We had to sort of skip that step and just do all of the production. And then if there was a problem, we were like, oh, ugh.
Yeah, I wanted to bring it up because I love the classics line. I have a huge wall of classics figures, kind of actually a corner of the heroes and the villains. But I needed to bring it up because I've mentioned it so many times on like other Toy Guys Talking and live streams, you know, but the ankles, I feel like I would have heard from a lot of people, why didn't you ask him about the ankles? You're always talking about the ankles and Matty Collector's red screen of death. So I feel like I need to bring up those two, even though I love the figures. And, you know, I've always had the attitude of it doesn't ruin the figure for me at all. And I fix it, right? If it's that big a problem, I have fixed it with a little bit of tightening glue and stuff like that. It's really not a big deal. The other option is just get rid of them all, put them in a box and have nothing there or something else. And I didn't want that option. I prefer these the way they are, the way they look. I think they look fantastic. You know, I don't really want to use the expression warts and all because it's not that bad. But the ankles, as well as the red screen of death, Matty Collector was really ahead of its time with Hasbro Pulse now doing that, online ordering, a lot of other sites. I got all of my Matty Collector figures through Matty Collector during that dreaded noon sale where everyone pours on and everyone gets the red screen of death. So if you want to just spend a couple minutes just for the sake of me, I brought it up to you. Memories of all of that stuff going on, and then we'll get on to happier times.
And by the way, before we leave the ankles thing, just to throw out, not that I'm being like, well, it happens on other lines, but as an example, I'm a big Marvel Legends collector currently, and there have been so many figures I've gotten where like the arm is locked in place, and when you try to move it, it snaps off and actually like breaks the plastic.
Modern G.I. Joe figures too.
Yeah. So it's like these kind of things, it's almost better to expect them to never happen is like throwing, you know, water in the ocean. And, you know, not that you should accept it and be like, and just roll over, but I'm just trying to manage expectations that, you know, all of these toys are designed with the same you know, engineering and manufacturing that, you know, like toddler toys, more or less, you know, they're meant to be played with, versus something like the, I'm blanking on the name, the Japanese Marvel, like they do Marvel Legends and Star Wars, Sigma Arts, was it SH Art? Am I totally
screwing like that? Yeah, I know the ones you're talking about.
So people don't think I'm like totally like, here's the Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
You know, from it, you know, he's got an articulated cape and, you know, all sorts of stuff. This is like $100 figure. And it doesn't have those problems, but that's because it's $100 figure.
Yeah.
So if you don't want, right. So basically the difference between a $20 figure and a $100 figure are sometimes things like the ankles, the swapped shoulders, the Marvel Legends, you know, arms or G.I. Joe arms breaking when you try to bend them. You don't get that when you spend $100 on an action figure, but so just food for thought. So,
well, I'm glad you bring that up, and I want to thank you for the reminder, because I'm sure we all forget, and sometimes I forget, but I appreciate the reminder that these were an online exclusive. They weren't made in mass quantities where they were released at Walmarts and Toys R Us's and Targets. These were like a limited edition, really collector's item. So it's a good reminder for me to just, next time I want to think, these ankles when one of them falls over, something like that, it's a good reminder to me to go, yeah, but you know what? That it was in such low quantities and so affordable too. The prices on them could have been $100 each, but you know what? I'll take 20 bucks or whatever they were, 22, 25 bucks with the issues over $100 and no issues any day. Cause I wouldn't have a wall of them if they were $100 each.
I mean, I own SH Figure Arts. I think I finally remembered the name. I own one, $100 SH Figure Arts figure versus, I own like, a gazillion Marvel Legends.
Marvel Legends, yeah.
So, it's like there's, your price point right there. And I accept the fact that some of them have bad paint or some of them, have joints that need to be boiled before you display them. And but let's get back to the red screen of death, your original question there.
Matty Collector, yeah.
So, I mean, it really falls kind of in the same bucket as production that, Mattel wasn't set up to do this kind of business, which is why we had to sort of outsource it to Digital River, which was a company that could handle international distribution, which was the big reason we went with them, because 30 to 40% of sales were out of the US. And we needed those sales just to meet the minimum order quantity. Without those sales, we would have only had half the order and not enough. So things like the red screen of death, having enough bandwidth, it was basically a learning curve because, there was no roadmap to doing this. There were no other examples like what HasLab does now. HasLab probably looked at what happened with Matty Collector and said, oh, okay, obviously let's make sure there's enough bandwidth, or let's make sure, this and this. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it was a learning curve. It was basically we were, pioneering new ground at Mattel within a category, meaning adult collector toys, that the company A had never done before outside of a couple Comic-Con exclusives, and B was not a core competency of the company. The way a core competency of, say, Super 7 is making adult collector figures. Mattel is as a company designed to pump out Barbies and Hot Wheels and Fisher-Price Little People by the millions. They're not designed to sell figures exclusively online, through a monthly club. I mean, we made that up as we were going. And, I think the fact that it went away after I left, is also kind of proof of that, because there was no structure within Mattel to keep it running. It was something I did because I loved doing it. So, we did the best we could with the resources we had. And I'm really proud of what we did. It wasn't perfect, but, we all have these awesome collections now, and I think we're happy with them.
Yeah. And I remember seeing you on He-Man.org. That was another really cool thing. I remember seeing ToyGuru popping up on He-Man.org in the message boards there. And it was such a new thing to have an actual, not just employee of the toy company making these toys, but, the honcho, to borrow Mark Webber's code name. I just talked to Mark Webber, who worked for Hasbro on the Transformers and G.I. Joe brands, and you were the He-Man honcho. So that was really cool watching you, reading your responses to the fans. Much like Mark, sometimes it's or maybe oftentimes, maybe you can share some of your thoughts on that. Oftentimes it's probably a thankless job. You're trying your best. You're trying to make everybody happy, which is impossible. Sometimes you're dealing with, a lot of people who are just looking for the next opportunity to complain or be upset or be offended. But, tip of the cap to you for all the time you spent interacting with fans, getting feedback, addressing issues, definitely listening to, the word on the street to address issues. So I just wanted to bring that up too. Thanks for being ToyGuru and actually interacting with people instead of being that impossible to get a hold of, boss man in the penthouse.
I mean, thank you. I'm very grateful for the very kind words. I think a lot of it, I didn't set out to become like a toy celebrity or like a PR spokesman. I just set out to treat the fans the way I, as a toy collector, wanted to be treated by toy companies. I mean, again, it's like the Hair Club for Men. I'd already been collecting toys for decades. And now that I was in this position to be making toys that were going to appeal to me, I mean, me, I'm just using myself as a template for the adult collector. yeah, I just wanted to communicate the way I wish, other companies would have communicated to me when I was, previously to my employment at Mattel. And, I also think that a lot of the negativity, again, just came like so much of it was not my fault, if you will.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when people would get angry at things and blame me, I would basically just shrug it off because, like, well, there was nothing I could have done about that. If it was something I could have done, then maybe, then I'd apologize, or I would legitimately feel bad. But I would say 95% of the things that people had issues with were things that were so beyond out of my control, or happened, without maybe, even if I knew about it, I couldn't have done anything. Yeah. So, and I was also, I was working on a toy line that I was actively collecting. I mean, I was a customer of classics. So it was like, and things like getting to make, Lieutenant Spectre here was kind of the reward for putting up with all of that in a way. And it's like, I may get made fun of online and people may be angry and calling me names and honestly sending me death threats, which Mattel security takes very seriously. Yeah. But I have an action figure of me. And so it's like, hey, as a collector, it's like, all right, I'll, deal with that.
Well, throughout history, there have been many people who shoot the messenger, and they just don't analyze, they don't analyze the message and who it's coming from, and think about, okay, well, this is just a messenger. Don't shoot the messenger. And you were in a unique position where you chose to be a messenger, but you were also, heavily involved in the designing the stuff. But it doesn't surprise me at all that you were getting those reactions, those extreme reactions to it. It might surprise a lot of people to hear like death threats over toys. Oh yeah. I mean, to be quite honest, like their mental illness knows no bounds, and that's just the truth. And I'm not saying there's a lot of, toy collectors that have mental illness. There's hockey fans with mental illness. There's wrestling fans. There's movie fans, it doesn't matter where you go in, and they don't have there's no filter. There's no moderation. It's just, it blurts out, and you have to deal with it. So again, tip of the hat to you for putting things in perspective and going, yeah, but the positives far outweigh the negatives, because I deal with some of those negatives too, but the positives so far outweigh the negatives. You have to, it comes to a gut check, and you got to ask yourself, all right, am I going to nitpick, or am I going to take a step back and take a look at the larger perspective? So each person has to make that decision.
And I also think that, to me, it wasn't necessarily the negative comments. It was, and by the way, my wife is a psychiatrist. She's a therapist, so I hear about this stuff all the time. But to me, the comments, it was much more like, here you are like bashing me or saying, why can't you go off bring someone else on the brand? It's like, don't you realize that if I wasn't doing this, this brand wouldn't exist? Yeah. And it's kind of like the proof in the pudding is when I left, the way I tend to explain it is I left Mattel with a full tank of gas, meaning all of 15 was like already in the hopper, and 2016 was like the ingredients were in the bowl. It just had to be put into the oven. So I left, with basically 2 years of the future planned out. And as soon as that gas ran out, nobody refilled it. And that's kind of like why, like, they basically kept it going while they had Scott's notes to keep, to follow. But then, yeah, it's like, no. So it's like, for all these people coming in and saying, screw you for judging me. I want to be like, don't you realize that if I wasn't doing this, there'd be no line? And I couldn't outrightly say that. I can say that now, right? But that would, like, you're biting the hand that feeds you here. Like, and also, I don't think fans realize how much the negativity sometimes that they post online, and this is good advice for all adult collectors, for all brands. There were so many times that Mattel actually tried to shut Matty Collector down over the years. And one of the more poignant times was when, again, it's like every year I had to sort of represent the line and explain why it was worth doing. And, and again, it's like part of the reason they agreed to let me keep doing it is I was willing to do it in addition to what I was getting paid to do by Mattel, which was run the DC movie and comic book lines at retail. And there was one meeting where, you know, we had all of upper management in a room, and it's like the annual presentation for what we're going to do in, you know, year X. And someone from management said, well, you're talking about, you know, how all the fans interact online and talk about this. I'm just curious what they're saying. So he goes on, you know, just brings up a screen on Google on like the giant, you know, screen that's, you know, he's got his computer in front of him, but it's, you know, it's projected on the wall for everyone in the room, giant. So he just types in like, you know, Matty collector, you know, fan reaction or something like that. And one of the first pages that pops up is a website that was just dedicated to bashing me. And he brings that up on a giant screen, you know, in front of, you know, 200 people. And he's reading through and scrolling at these places like, this is horrible. This is what people are saying about you and about the line. Why in the world would we keep this going? And I had to really talk him down and try to explain that, you know, like everything you were just talking about.
Yeah, it's not people. It's a very, you know.
The internet is louder than it is numerous.
Right.
You know, the way I put it. I had Mattel's analytic department once do a review and an analysis of the number of people posting on a couple fan sites, like take 30 days worth of posts. Mm-hmm. And while there might have been thousands of posts, it came out that there were only 28 individual posters. Just you know,
OCD kind of, right?
So yeah, basically, and I was able to use that data to try to kind of talk this VP down who's like, why are we even doing Matty Collector if it's generating this much anger?
Right.
And I was like, it's only one guy, or it's only 28 guys that are doing this compared to the, you know, thousands of people that we're making happy. Yep. But the happy people don't tend to post.
That's right.
So, you know, I would give, you know, unsolicited advice out there for anyone who is collecting figures, who's listening to this your podcast here, is negative words against the lines you collect really do hurt the chances of those lines continuing. And, you know, while it's legitimate to complain about something, you know, or to suggest ways you want it done better, just coming out negative can actually have a detrimental effect on the line. So
that's
be
right.
careful.
And I've always said 2 compliments for every criticism. So it's a challenge I love to do to people who just seem, the thing that I've experienced the most is if I maybe do an hour video or a half-hour video that took a lot of time in editing, and then the one comment is something criticizing, you know, I don't even bother arguing or trying to reason with them because there's nothing to win and there's nothing to enlighten with that type of mentality. But I always think to myself, all right, now you owe me 2 compliments. Let's see if you can do it. And I have something inside me that, you know, when I do say, man, these ankles are loose, but the sculpting is so awesome. And this very, very subtle flesh wash, you know, is so beautiful on it. I have to balance things out, and not just balance, not just one for one, but I always feel it's important to tip the balance in the positive, you know, side. So that's why 2 compliments for every criticism. And for the people who have given that some thought and went, maybe I should start doing that, and it's affected their mood in a positive way, then I'm glad to hear that. But I think for the most part, the people who give one criticism for 0 compliments, that's just how they're wired and always will be. And they're those people who are looking for something to complain about.
Yeah, you're not going to win over everyone.
How did you get started at Mattel?
So, well, basically, I mean, I kind of always wanted to get into the toy industry. When I was in college, I actually wrote my senior thesis on using toys, specifically action figures, as a marketing vehicle for movies. I was a film major at UC Santa Barbara.
Aren't we all?
Exactly. So I really wanted to get into toy making. And growing up in Southern California, the old Mattel building headquarters used to be in Hawthorne. And when you would drive the main freeway, which was the 405 between Orange County, where I lived, and Los Angeles, you would always pass this giant brick building on the side of the freeway with a huge Mattel logo. And so as a kid, you're like, whoa, that's, you know, like this giant toy company right here. Mm-hmm. So post-college, I was able to use some connections I had to get an informational interview at Mattel to find out how I could work there. And so I sat down with a gentleman And I said, you know, I wanted to be a toy maker. And he basically said, well, you need a degree in engineering. And I was like, oh, crud. Like, I can't do that. I'm not an engineer. Yeah. So much for that dream. So I packed up my stuff, and what I also assumed I was going to try to do was go into marketing as a writer, as a copywriter. And I wound up doing that. And I worked for 4 years in medical marketing. I worked for a company doing glaucoma medication. I could tell you more about glaucoma than you ever wanted to know. And I feel like I have a medical degree in interocular nerves. So I wound up, I'm a collector. I'm going to Comic-Con on my own. This is back when you used to be able to just walk into Comic-Con. I mean, you'd have to buy a ticket, but you could just walk down to the show and buy a ticket and walk in. And, happier times. So I was at the Mattel booth, and I actually had some pictures of a toy display I'd done at a local library. I was going out with a girl who was a librarian at the time in a summer program to get kids to read. They were doing a thing about comic books. So I set up the display with a bunch of my comic book figures and a bunch of, stuff like that, Marvel Legends, JOU. And I actually brought it to show someone completely different, but I happened to have it on me. And I wound up at the Mattel booth talking to Eddie Hayden, who was the brand manager for Justice League, but became Justice League Unlimited, the 5-inch or 4-inch Bruce Timm line. So he saw my display and he was like, whoa, this is amazing. You did this huge display with our toys. Like, have you ever thought about working at Mattel? I was like, have I ever?
Simple as that.
And, but really the difference was, and once I was at Mattel at Comic-Con, I used to get people coming up all the time. Same thing, like, I want to work at Mattel. And the answer would be like, okay, what do you want to do? And 99% of the time they would be like, oh, I want to make toys. What I had was I actually had a professional portfolio of the work I'd done in marketing in medical care, and was able to show that to him. He said, oh yeah, like, we're always looking for talented writers. And I know the Hot Wheels group is hiring. So I can take your material and pass it on to them, which he did. Mm-hmm. Took a couple months, I finally got a call, and they had me come up for an interview. And what I would have never assumed was the experience I had doing medical copy and advertising was very transferable to toys, because all of the regulations on medical medicine and medical stuff, I mean, anyone who's seen a medical ad sees there's like an entire page of warnings, and you have to have all sorts of,
may cause death.
Yeah, may cause death, may cause eating a toy. So that skill set transferred over really one-to-one to working as a copywriter for Mattel, because the same thing, with a Hot Wheel or a Barbie, there's safety warnings and small parts warnings and international warnings and all that. So they saw a very usable skill set, but also because I was very passionate about toys, they basically got a job as an entry-level copywriter in the Hot Wheels group. And I mean, that was fantastic. I moved up to Los Angeles. I got my own apartment, like literally across the street. And I worked for, about a year and a half in the Hot Wheels copy group. And I was the one who named all the basic Hot Wheels and wrote the copy on the track sets. Things like jump through the loop and, knock over the dragon while you zoom around town and you're the winner. Yeah. And I mean, it was wonderful, but 2 cubicles over were the guys working on the DC Superheroes line in Justice League, which I collected. And eventually there was a meeting where upper management kind of was doing a in the trenches review with all the groups. And they were going group to group, finding out, what are your issues? What are the problems you're having? How can I help solve them as a VP? So when this VP came to the Hot Wheels packaging group, most of the people are saying, oh, we're having trouble, with like blisters that won't, adhere, or getting this kind of card stock to work for the, to hold the cars in place. And so I'm in the back and I raise my hand and say, why don't we make adult action figures for collectors? And the VP's looking at me, he's like, what are you talking about? That's like the last thing I'm here to talk about. But that's an interesting thought. Why don't you call my receptionist and make a meeting? Took 4 months, but I finally got that meeting, and I came in with a business plan and samples of product, ranging from, NECA Stactions to Disneyland Indiana Jones figures, and saying like, look, these are the brands that exist. This is the product that's out there. Here's the brands we own. And with that meeting, they transferred me over into the marketing group to put together a plan for Matty Collector. And I worked on that for the next 8 years. That's kind of how it all worked.
Wow. And then, well, the line ran really long. It's so awesome that you got to do all of the original characters, which I'm sure was like a driving thing for you to get them all done, you know, including Clamp Champ and Rio Blast, even the Twistoid and Rodar guys, all of those got finished. And then you walked on into the horizon from Mattel, and now you're doing your own thing, right?
Yeah, I spent about so I was at Mattel for 10 years, and then I spent about another 10 years at a few smaller companies, Jakks Pacific, Jada Toy, where I did the Nano figures. I was at Loot Crate for a while, Entertainment Earth, and really it came to leaving California that my family just kind of got to a point that we said, you know, why are we still living here with the cost of living and crime and just there's so many things that make it difficult. And we found this beautiful city called Greensboro, North Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
I tell people it's got 300,000 people, 5 comic book stores, a water park, and a dinosaur museum. You know, I like those odds.
Yeah.
It's great. I mean, we have a lawn. My daughter can play. She just went bike riding yesterday. Could have never done that in LA. And then when I got here, yeah, I started a freelance company to help toy companies develop better product. And what I really do with Spectre Creative, which you can see both at spectrecreative.com and on my YouTube channel.
Links will be in the show notes here.
Okay, great. Yeah, see the note below. What my company does is we look at product from an emotional centric standpoint. And when I mentioned about my wife being a therapist, because she actually partners with me on a lot of stuff. Her degree, she has a master's from NYU actually in child play therapy. So what we help companies do is develop product that actually meets the emotional needs of customers. You know, why do collectors collect? Why do kids play? From my time in the toy industry, I found that most of the people who work in it, a phrase I tend to use is there's not enough Geppettos or too many suits, not enough Geppettos. Yeah. And most people in the toy industry are really just there to either get a company on their resume or just produce consumer goods. They could be producing toothbrushes or action figures. Like, it doesn't matter. They're there to run margins and do velocity at retail, etc. But really understanding why the consumer, whether it's a kid, a mom, a collector, a grandparent, whatever they are, there's a reason they're buying that toy. And an understanding of that generates better product and better sales. And with kind of that mantra, I've been doing some great business with a lot of toy companies and helping them make better product.
I feel like that's what I've been talking about for years on here. I don't like talking about price and value and all that stuff. I don't get too hung up on the small details. I talk about the love, right? The character. What does the character mean to you? Why'd you guys fall in love with the character in the first place? And with a lot of the things that irritate people, annoy them, or disappoint them, I think it comes down to, where's the love? So when a new line comes out, or it's transferable to movies too, comics, TV shows, whatever, when they reboot something, bring it back. I always like to use Star Wars. I feel like the original trilogy is really filled with a lot of love, and there's a lot of spirituality to it. And the whole message was always, power of the Force is greater than any effect, any weapon. Whereas the new ones, a lot of original fans watch the new ones, and I think, whether they phrase it this way or not, I think the feeling is, where's the love? You got a lot of cool stuff and dark stuff and action butt kick stuff, but where's the love? The stuff that really connects with people is stuff like Mandalorian. That's basically a love letter. You know, where are the love letters? So when a new line comes out, like Origins, to me, He-Man Origins seems like a love letter to He-Man fans. You know, we're taking everything you loved, and I think it's connecting on an emotional level with people. I like that term you used. And then when there's other lines that come out, new lines, and you look at it kind of sideways and you go, is that? You know, it's the same name, but I don't feel like it's that. Where's the love, right? They're including the name and then maybe one or two details, but the actual, you know, emotionality is missing from the thing.
Honestly, you said it really great. You know, don't want to specifically point to the new Star Wars movies, but, you know, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you said. in general, Hollywood tends to make a lot of movies using a spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, you know, female hero, silly sidekicks voiced by a celebrity, like,
checklists.
And one of the other big services I actually do on SpectreCreative.com is I call toyetic script review, where I work with studios. And luckily, because I've had the chance to relationships with so many of, Warner Brothers and Sony, Universal, Disney, Lucasfilm, I know people at all of them. And the service is essentially to review a script at the script stage before it's shooting, and to infuse into that script toyetic elements that are going to actually work as toys organically, not forced. I mean, a good example are like those jet troopers in the last Star Wars movie. The jetpack, those were put into the movie late specifically to be toys. Mm-hmm. And that's great that you were thinking about toys, but that conversation needs to happen at the script stage. Forcing it in at the end never works. And again, understand that it's a combination between the emotional connection, toyetic elements, which are things that work in a story. Like lightsabers are perfect. The lightsabers are so toyetic. There's an instant energy blade. It's visual. It's a signature weapon. There are things about a lightsaber that make it a good toy. Versus Jack Sparrow's sword. It's not a good toy, but they're both swords. Why is one better than the other? That's the difference between something that's toyetic and not. So yeah, I mean, I really do think studios, if they want to have that emotional connection the way the original Star Wars trilogy did, with the Force being spiritual, the hero's journey, the character arcs, need to really look, at the script stage at creating that emotional connection. And if they want to sell product, infusing toyetic elements in at that point, not like at the end of the day when they edit scenes together and say, oh, quick, throw a squiggly monster in the background so we can make a plush toy.
But that's a great point about the lightsaber, and it goes back to what I was saying about where's the love. The lightsaber, I remember there was a really bad, cheesy 70s movie called Star Crash. It was a total Star Wars ripoff. And at one point, the guy fires up a lightsaber. It's a total lightsaber, total ripoff of a lightsaber, and he just has it for no reason whatsoever. And you're supposed to think, cool. And that movie doesn't work on a lot of levels, but that's one of them. Why does it work? I think a big reason why lightsabers are so special, in addition to they look cool, they sound cool, and all that, think back to the first time you ever saw a lightsaber, or a lot of people, first time they ever saw one. Obi-Wan Kenobi is lovingly picking it up out of a box, carrying it slowly, and telling Luke, this is special. This was your father's. He wanted you to have this. This is precious. It's not just and cutting a guy's arm off in a bar. Like, that was our introduction to the lightsaber, being told this is special. And that's exactly what you're talking about. In the script stage, you need to make things special. You need to include the love instead of just, let's whip out a jet trooper. And here he is. He's cool, isn't he? Don't you want to buy him? No. Why is he special?
Hey, kids at home, buy this. Yeah, no. Yeah, it's a really great way. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, that scene with Obi-Wan, he's explaining the Force. It surrounds us, it penetrates us, it worked on so many levels. And and all
that's missing in the new ones. Not to get on a Star Wars discussion, but that's what I feel the difference is between the two. The basically Obi-Wan lovingly carrying something, that's how you do it right. Take your time, talk about the specialness, versus like they're running and going, oh, we've got to do this and that. Like, that's not how you convey specialness.
This is the way.
This is the way. Absolutely. You excited for the next Mandalorian season?
Oh, I am. Yeah.
Who is it?
The moment that when he walked on screen and you heard the spurs, that didn't exist, but you heard, do you know about that whole thing with the, that they put the spur sound effect on Boba Fett, but they didn't have actual spurs. The moment I heard that, I'm like, okay, I'm all in. Yeah. Like, they obviously know what they're doing here. I was like, there we go, right there. They added the spur sound effect. That was just awesome.
I'm most excited because it's guys who understand the love. And you talked about suits versus Geppettos. That's a great analogy. It's actually a perfect analogy, because whenever us as collectors or movie fans, comic fans, we feel something is off, it's usually the suit is the thing that's off. Suit equals forced. Geppetto equals organic, genuine, from the heart. Suits can't do it, right? And you know, I don't want this to be like, oh, he hates everyone in a suit. There are Geppettos who wear suits. Suit is just a description, and as I often say, pick another word if suit doesn't work for you, right? Like corporate type of, driven by climbing the corporate ladder. That is the image I'm thinking of. So I'm really, really happy that I got to chat with you, because you are a Geppetto of the toy community. You're a toy fan. You made toys. You know, toys were by a fan, you yourself, for other fans. I think you've just done a great service to He-Man fans, as well as DC fans, and all the other toy lines that you've worked on. So this has just been an absolute pleasure. As I often say on here, I feel like we've just scratched the surface. So I'd love to chat with you again sometime about all the other interesting things you've done in the toy world and beyond.
Absolutely, and honestly, a huge pleasure, and grateful for you for inviting me on. It's always wonderful when I can, you know, chat. Even I just love talking toys, and it's not like, you know, I talk to my wife, you know, and daughter about this kind of stuff. So it's it's absolute pleasure for me too. So thank you very much. I'm grateful for being invited on.
Much appreciated. How can people get a hold of you? In addition to the stuff will be there on the bottom, but where are you around the internet?
Yeah, I mean, the stuff on the bottom is just spectorcreative.com, like the action figure.
This dude right here. I got the prequel figure.
There we go. See, look, they're battling cross screen.
He's got good ankles, by the way. It's not a
yeah, this one holds up.
Yeah.
We must have done that on purpose.
Special for you.
But yeah, I mean, definitely I would encourage people listening to your podcast to check out Spector Creative on YouTube. I have literally hundreds of videos at this point. I pretty much post daily, doing director's commentary on figures I've made, discussing the toy industry, you know, everything from why do empty pegs happen, to case packs, to re-releases and the difficulty of doing them from a logistics standpoint, really trying to answer questions that I as a collector would have had, and I wish a company would just explain this. So check it out on YouTube, Spector Creative. You'll enjoy it. Hours of entertainment, all free.
And I think that'll help people a lot. You know, people, they want to be zen, they want to be chill about this stuff. All you need is the knowledge. All you need is the explanation. And sometimes all of those, you know, burning questions, they just melt away when you find out it's something as simple as, hey, it's a $20 figure made on a limited run. There's going to be issues. Oh, it's just as simple as that. So your channel is filled with stuff like that, and I'm looking forward to seeing. I've seen some of your videos, and they're fantastic. All this behind the scenes, you know, interesting knowledge, filling in the blanks, and figuring out why things are done the certain way they are, and why they have to be done a certain way as well. So I highly recommend people check out your channel as well.
Thank you very much for the endorsement.
All right, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this chat. Thank you very much for listening. And until next time, Nerdmas Day.